I'm hearing so many people still say that junior engineers are never going to get jobs or don't have jobs anymore because AI can take those jobs. I think it's a misconception to say that, junior engineers aren't wanted anymore. They're just wanted in a different way. They're wanted with like different knowledge bases and different perspectives. I think it's still really important to learn how to write code. And I think it always will be because we still have to consider security and other issues. But learning AI, I think, is like the best thing you can possibly do for yourself right now.
Sabrina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so it's like interview style. I'll just ask you a bunch of questions about your career, but first to warm up, what's a skill or talent you might have that people might not know about?
Yeah, most people don't know that I'm super creative and I love everything fiber. So, knitting, crocheting, embroidery, basically as far away from tech as you can get, where I'm not near a monitor, a computer, or a laptop at all.
Cool. So what's something you made recently?
Um, I've never finished anything, actually. I know that sounds
Just like
really
the
weird.
process of it,
Yes,
other than the
yeah.
actual result. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I love trying really difficult like stitching techniques, but then I get really bored of them after a
Yeah.
while and then I just put it down.
Yeah. It is one of those things where you just have to be doing it for a
Yes.
very long time to finish a piece.
Yep.
Makes sense. And if you hadn't gone into tech, what's a career that you'd imagine yourself doing?
That's actually pretty easy for me because I was a career changer. So my career before tech was in video editing, and I really loved it. It was a phenomenal creative outlet. But the problem with video editing is everyone really likes doing it, right? It's really fun, and so it wasn't paying my bills. And so that's why I decided to say, you know what, I have this other passion for tech that allows me to be equally creative, just in a slightly different way. And that's when I made the pivot, but I would definitely go back if I couldn't be in tech anymore.
Cool. And do you remember a time that you realized that you enjoy solving technical problems?
When I was in college, I actually took a C++ class. I was studying biomedical engineering. I ended up moving out of biomedical engineering and getting an English degree. But while I was studying biomedical engineering, I took a C++ class and I got to experience what it was like to build just like small applications that were very physics heavy. And I was like, wow, like the things that we can do by just typing a few words into a computer was incredible to me. And so that's kind of what really got me excited to try it again later on in life.
And so was that your earliest memory in like kind of coding?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Cool. And then when we first talked, you mentioned the Frontend Masters bootcamp that we ran.
Yes.
It was like 8 years ago
Yes.
now or something
Yes.
like that. But yeah, like how did you find that? Like what did you learn in it? And
Yeah, so it was an HTML CSS boot camp. It was a weekend or a week long, I can't remember exactly. And like you said, it was like 8 years ago. I found you all online. I was like, I really want to make this change. Love writing code, but I have no idea how I would possibly learn. And that was what really turned the tides for me. That was when I was like, I have to be in tech. I loved writing HTML and CSS, but it was kind of funny because after all that, I was like, well, what do I do next? I hadn't even heard of JavaScript before. So, Frontend Masters was a huge part of that journey to really help me see not only what I had to learn, but help me actually get there. And so, I'm so excited to be here now.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. You look at there was like 150,000 or something people that went
Yes.
through it over the years, and it's like you don't really exactly. It's just kind of a
A
number in a
number.
way. It's like we obviously the people in the room like we spent a long time with, and um followed up to see how they were doing and everything like that. But like people online, it's like you put these things out there and you're not exactly sure. Like so, it's always really fun to meet someone like you that went the journey from like the boot camp and like all the way to now being a teacher. You
Yeah.
taught on prompt engineering, which was great.
Yeah.
You did fantastic.
Thank you.
So
I thought it was actually really cool too because I was still in the Slack workspace for like 6 years after, and every great once in a while, someone would still post, and I was like, "This is just such a cool community that people are still talking. Like, hey, do you know how to fix this?" And I was like, "No, I don't know how to fix this. I still have to Google how to center a div, but we can look it up together." You know?
that's cool. And what was your? So you mentioned like you took the boot camp and then you're like, okay, what do I do this? What like how did you eventually make that transition?
Yeah, I went after that and I took a bunch of other courses through local colleges. I did a bunch of other online Frontend Masters courses. And then I found my way to two different boot camps, one of them being Codesmith. And I graduated from Codesmith. I stayed on as a fellow. After that, I started teaching with Codesmith, which was also very rewarding. And that's kind of how I found my way eventually into this career.
That's awesome. So what was your first job like post Codesmith?
Yeah, so my first job post Codesmith was at a startup called Monument. It was a health tech startup really focused on helping people with their relationship with alcohol, whether that mean they're looking for moderation or sobriety. And that was a really impactful role because I got to see how being a software engineer, I could make a huge difference in people's lives the same way that I loved, video editing and being creative. Like now I was just doing it on a totally different level, but really getting to affect people's health and their mental health. And that was like hugely important to me.
That's awesome. And that was like a full stack role or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was Node, React, Postgres, and an incredible place with really smart people, way smarter than me. And I feel like I learned so, so much in that first role.
And thinking back to your journey earlier in your career, what advice would you have to other folks who are like either thinking about transitioning or like, you know,
Yeah.
starting that transition to tech?
I would say just don't be afraid to ask for help. Whether that's because you got your first job and you don't know if you should ask that question or not. Yes, you absolutely should, right? Or if you're trying to make that transition, don't be afraid to try every avenue. I went to local community colleges, I did online courses, I did in-person courses. Whatever you need to get yourself there is just what you should do, but anybody can do it. I did it when I was almost 30 years old. It's not like you're too old, you're not too dumb, you're not too anything. Just be brave and you can do it.
That's awesome. And then what about like the actual job search or like getting connected and getting your first role? Like, do you have
Yeah, that
advice
was
there?
yeah, that was really tough. I'm very shy naturally, and part of why I teach is to get over that shyness. But I would say really just talk to people, try and make connections. I think one thing that people do is they try and make connections by reaching out on LinkedIn and being like, "Hey, will you refer me?" But first try and make that connection just person to person, right? I'm really interested in what you're building. Do you mind setting up a coffee chat, right? And make it like a long-term goal to ask for that reference, for that referral. And I think that people are very open to that. And that was actually how I got the interview at Monument was from a friend who I was like, "Wow, you work at like the coolest company ever." And she was like, "I can refer you." And I was like, "No way." And it all, just kept going from there.
That's awesome. And then, so you mentioned you had this full stack role. And I know you've kind of like worked in like Node and Go and Postgres, and then also, kind of React in the front end. Like, what do you feel like there's a part of the stack that you like working in the most, or do you feel like,
Yeah, that's tough. So early in my career, I loved the back end. I found the front end to be very challenging, especially trying to make things look nice, and making things pixel perfect. But now that I work in Go, I actually tend to enjoy my front end work better just because I see a lot more creativity in it. I'm like my Myers Briggs type is an INFP, so anything creative is like super happy to me. And Go is not the most creative language, so now I kind of favor front end, but I think I'll continue to like flip flop based on what I'm working in. Like when I'm working in Ruby on Rails, I just love writing back end code. So I really like a mixture. I'm happy anywhere.
cool? And then how did you find, like GitHub, that role or opportunity?
Yeah, I got really lucky. So I was working at Monument and someone reached out to me and was like, "Would you like to work at GitHub?" And I was like, "Sure." And they were like, "Well, we can set up an interview for you next week." And I literally took the interview as a joke. And I don't mean that rudely. Like it wasn't a joke for GitHub, but I just was like, there's no way I'm ever going to pass. But I was like, I need to just step out of my comfort zone and try. And then when I was in the interview process, I met a couple of absolutely amazing people who were so incredibly kind and smart. And I started crying in my interview process because we had such a cool interview and we were just got so close. And I realized like that was a place I really wanted to be. And magically, I actually passed the technicals too. And so when they offered me the role, I was like, yes, of course, please, I'll take it. But it was a lot of luck at the time. I spent a lot of time in the developer community, right? So teaching, mentoring, just kind of being around online, and that's how they found me, and so I would encourage other people to really think about that too if they're having troubles in the job search. Try and just do things for others because ultimately it helps you too, and it helps other people too.
And then, like, you don't have to reveal anything proprietary or whatever, but are there some fun, like, stories or projects that you've gotten to work on at GitHub?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the billing team for the first couple years there, and we built an entirely new billing system for GitHub, which is completely done and moved over to now, which was a really incredible project, getting to see for such a large company taking on such a huge undertaking. And it was really wonderful. And now getting to work on Copilot, I just work on the coolest tools every single day.
That's awesome. And then, you also have, basically like a startup, or you've kinda worked on a project on the
Yes.
side, called Circulart. Could you talk
Yes.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Circulart is a fintech startup in the emerging market space. So basically, we're collecting data from central banks that are in emerging markets, so Africa, Latin America, Asia, and we are providing that information for the first time ever to financial institutions and people who might want that, right? Like hedge funds and other people. We utilize like AI technology too to help categorize it and make sure we're only sending things that they'd be interested in getting. And that has been a really cool experience because it's my first time getting to manage and lead a team and also be in charge of the entire technical architecture of an entire startup. So that's been a really cool adventure as well.
So how do you, like, balance, I guess, the
Not well. No, I'm just kidding. It's a lot of work. I think AI has really brought me more balance in my life since it started. When we first started, Copilot was barely an autocomplete, so I was spending a lot of time asking people to help me write code and me just handling code reviews. But as Copilot and Cursor have gotten better, I've found that I can now cut down the work I would do in a week into a day. And so I can do my day job and spend 8 hours there and then spend a couple of hours at night on the startup, maybe a day over the weekend on the startup, and still make pretty decent progress, and I'm lucky enough now to have a team under me as well.
That's awesome. So what kind of tips, have you found, like, working with AI, like, just drilling into that a little bit? Like, do you feel like, there's been some certain workflows that have really kind of unlocked things for you recently?
Yeah, so I think for myself, I have really learned that I utilize AI best when I'm going to bed and I can't like turn my brain off because there's too many things I have to do the next day between GitHub and the startup. And so I will just pull open a Claude chat and I'll be like, hey, let's talk about like this new feature that we're trying to build. Okay, give me like the negatives, give me the positives. How much is this going to cost me? How much time is this going to take? And so I use AI as like this bedtime assistant a lot of the time just to get all of my thoughts out and know that they're going to be safe somewhere and know that I can just summarize them at the end of the chat. But it's like having like my rubber duck just sitting in my bed next to me, but my rubber duck is actually taking notes now. So that's been great.
Cool. And then you kind of like a interesting story with, like, finding AI. You kinda mentioned in
Yeah.
your course. Can you share that a little bit?
Yeah, so, like I said, I was using Copilot, and it wasn't much more than an autocomplete, and so I was like, "Oh, I don't really use any of these tools," and I went on a knitting retreat, and these 2 women who were nearly retirement age were like, "Oh, you work at a tech company. I bet you use ChatGPT all the time," and I was like, "No, why?" And they were like, "We do," and they were both near retirement age, but they were both teachers, and they said that using ChatGPT was a way they could come up with lesson plans or give students new ways to try things or teach things. And they said it had saved them, hundreds of hours a year. And they were like, it makes it so much easier to teach at our age. So I was like, okay, I downloaded ChatGPT that weekend and focused on the knitting retreat and got home. And I just absolutely fell in love with the technology. I was like, this is way more incredible than I could have even imagined. And in the years since, it's only gotten better.
Yeah. And then when you were talking about, kinda like how you use AI as like a rubber duck, do you, find when you're writing code, do you, kind of prompt and kind of like, interact with the code, or do you go the full, like, agent style where you're listing out, like, a ton of tasks and it's just going, through the tasks? Like, how do you find balance there?
So I think for me, it depends on if I'm at GitHub or at the startup. At GitHub, because I know that my code is touching so many millions of users in a day, I am very meticulous to write most of the code myself while utilizing AI to say, "Hey, like, could I have done this better?" Right? Like, looking for optimizations, looking for those kinds of changes. At the startup, my goal is to not write a single line of code ever. I utilize AI for everything. I'm like, write this. And then what I do, even though it's like kind of vibe coding style, I still go line by line for every single line of code that was written. And I just check it for myself. Does this make sense? Does it seem like I need it? Does it seem, extra? Does it seem safe and secure? And then I accept or reject and kind of adjust using prompts. But I try to use AI really differently at both jobs just to kind of see how much time can I save or am I wasting by doing it one way or the other, and I really like both styles so far.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. It's like with Greenfield, you're leaning into it heavier for like boilerplate and,
Yes.
kind of like ideation and, like you said, trade-offs between features and that kind of thing. But like as a project evolves, I feel like especially in a large code base like GitHub or,
Yeah.
a larger existing code base like Frontend Masters, I guess, you're wanting to make much more performant and like,
Yes.
evolving to the code base. And I feel like AI is like
Getting
20%
there. Yeah.
helpful in that, like, situation at the moment. Not that it
Yes.
couldn't get much better in the future, but, yeah, certainly with Greenfield, you can go
Just have
wild.
fun with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I find the same thing. I find that large code bases, just because there's so much context, it's just hard for some of these tools still to kind of keep track of everything you need and
Yeah,
follow the right patterns and everything, so it's nice to use it as like a, "Okay, I got this error, fix it for me," instead of, like, focusing everything. Yeah.
yeah. The other day we have a design system and I was trying to, um, just scaffold out a new page and it was just constantly using, like,
Something
classes
totally
that
different.
Yeah, classes
Yeah.
that don't exist, and
Yeah.
it's just like, "No, I gave you the context. It's not really that many classes." Just,
Yes.
like, kept kept
It
making up
struggles
stuff. Even
sometimes.
with the latest models, the latest
Yep.
update to Cursor, I was just like, I was getting
Yeah.
very frustrated.
Yes.
Anyways, I don't know what it is about AI sometimes that makes you, like, so mad,
I
but,
feel like it's like a
like
human too, like, some
yeah,
days you're like, "You're the best and I love you," and other days
yeah,
it's like you're useless, and it's just like me, like, some days my
yeah.
brain is like, "Yeah, no, nothing's happening today."
Cool, and then, what inspired you to go to Codesmith, and, like, how did that experience shape your, kind of, you mentioned getting into teaching, like was that your first kind of launch into teaching or
So, my first launch into teaching was when I was, like, 7 years old, and I made my parents bring all my fake invisible friends to a restaurant because I was like, "Well, we have to bring the whole class," because I always wanted to be a teacher. But yeah, that was my first, like, legitimate teaching experience. I wanted to go to Codesmith because I felt like I was in this weird place where I knew how to write code really well, like, I could actually write front end, back end code, but how did I get a job? Like, I don't know how to get a job, right? And I just couldn't figure that out, and I was like, "I feel like there's just something missing." And I went to Codesmith, and it was perfect for someone like me, especially because Codesmith is hard. The curriculum is so intense and so hard, and I still struggled even though I knew a lot, but it was, like, the perfect setup for me to say, like, "This is how I turn my skills into, like, a way that I can actually get a job, and it really helped me there, and I'm so grateful for that, and then getting to teach with them after, yeah, it was just a wonderful experience because I always knew I wanted to teach, but this gave me an outlet to teach something that I really enjoyed and definitely gave me some, like, imposter syndrome help too when I was getting into that first job.
that's awesome, and you started speaking at conferences and stuff like that as well,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I've been asked now to speak at a couple conferences and, do a couple of news articles, so it's been a really cool year.
Yeah, and then yeah, obviously you taught it for the masters and
Yeah, this was a dream.
so that's awesome. What do you feel like uh keeps you coming back to teaching? I know you said from a young age you always wanted to be it, but now that you are, like, what kind of, you know keeps you coming back?
I want to give back. So I remember how incredibly hard it was for me when knew I wanted to go into tech. And I was like, I don't know how to get there. And it took me literally 8 years to figure it out how to get there. And I was like, if I can help people to make that transition in half that time or a quarter of that time, I'm absolutely going to do it. And so even though I'm super shy and awkward and I always stress out so much before I teach, like that's what keeps me teaching is just hoping that there's somebody out there who's listening who's like, I know I can do it now and now I have the path to do it because of something that I've given them.
That's awesome. And what advice would you have for like people who want to kind of take that step into teaching?
I would say do it because it's so scary. And if you feel like you don't have opportunities to do it, make your own opportunities to do it. So, for myself, when I was at Codesmith and still a resident, I created a Coachella conference because we had a week off. And I was like, we're going to forget everything we just learned. So, I was like, let's make a little conference and have all of the residents teach the other residents stuff that they didn't know. And I made those little teaching experiences for myself. And then when I was able to go and get asked to do speaking events, I was like, yeah, I have this experience. I've done it before. So I think if you want to teach, first of all, be brave because it's very scary. But second, just make those opportunities for yourself until you can get opportunities elsewhere.
As you look ahead, like what's next or anything you're like excited to learn, that kind of thing?
I'm excited to learn everything. And I know that sounds silly, but it's so true. I feel like even after 3.5 years at GitHub, I still feel like I know nothing there. And it's funny because one of my interviewers said the same thing to me when I was there. I was like, what's the hardest part of working at GitHub? And she was like, I've been here forever and I feel like I know nothing. And so for me, I think that's diving into like deeper topics, learning more things, hopefully teaching more of the things that I learn. Um, yeah, and just kind of exploring what else is out there, I think, in tech.
That's awesome. Do you keep any sort of like personal or professional like bucket list or goals
I
or
do, and this was at the top of it, so now I'm like, I have to start the bucket list over, I'm so serious. I was, like, talking about that over dinner last night, I was like, "Well, now what?" Like, I've done it all that I wanted to do, so, yeah, I think next for me is maybe trying to live stream because that's something that scares me a lot, and I love using AI in really weird ways to learn, and I think that would be kind of fun to show people is to, like, live stream just me chatting with Claude, making a total fool of myself, so maybe that.
I like that. Uh, and then kind of like looking back at your journey, what do you feel like if I do this or if I've done this, it seems to always work out for me, kind of like, do you have any themes that you keep coming back to?
It's really been persistence, I think, for me. I have seen so many friends give up, and I'm like, "You are at the cusp of greatness," and to be honest, I mean, to get here took me years, right? I was 8 years ago I took that course, and it was that moment that I said I would love to teach here, and that took a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of persistence, and I think that people just give up a little bit too easily sometimes when the going gets tough. The last 4 years, I've been taking teaching gigs that paid nothing, that seemed like they were nothing, and everyone was like, "You're wasting your time," and I was like, "I'm not, because one day I'm going to be sitting in this chair." And today I'm sitting in this chair, so obviously it was worth it. So just be really persistent because tech is really hard and tech is really unforgiving sometimes, but you can make it. Anyone can make it. I firmly believe that.
That's awesome advice. And you're big into like AI, so I wanted to ask you this question. Like, is there a perspective or an idea that people have about um AI that you would think they should consider or like a misperception or something that you feel like, nah, this is really cool.
I genuinely think that people, and I'm hearing less of it now, but I'm hearing so many people still say that junior engineers are never going to get jobs or don't have jobs anymore because AI can take those jobs. And I think that's a total misconception still. I think now is the best time to join this race because if you're a junior who has worked for 2 days in the field, you can still use these tools with just as much precision as a staff engineer with 25 years in the space. Yeah, you're going to understand the code a little, less well, but there are a lot of places out there that don't care about that, right? Because as these tools get better, then you won't need to understand the code nearly as well. We'll still use English more as like the new coding language. So I think that people have this unique opportunity to become experts in AI, even if they don't have that expertise of 20 plus years in coding. And I think that they will find their place, right, because of that. So I think it's a misconception to say that, junior engineers aren't wanted anymore. They're just wanted in a different way. They're wanted with like different knowledge bases and different perspectives. And I think it's still really important to learn how to write code. And I think it always will be because we still have to consider security and other issues. But learning AI, I think, is like the best thing you can possibly do for yourself right now.
Cool. Um, yeah, well, what would you say to like more on this like you're in sort of like that mid to senior
Yep.
or well, definitely senior level. So what would you say to like I don't know, other fellow colleagues versus like, juniors?
I still see a lot of my colleagues really say that AI is useless. And I think that that's also a misconception. I think that, like you said, right, there are those amazing things that it can do and some things that it absolutely can't do. But for me, if there's something I don't like to do at work, you bet yourself I'm, automating it today and tomorrow. And so why not at least try and use it? I still have a lot of friends who literally refuse to use these tools. And I think that's a mistake because I don't think they're going anywhere and I don't think they're perfect and I don't think they'll ever be perfect, but I do think it's important to be open to new technology, right? And that's why we all got into tech because we like learning new things and trying new things. So I just hope that for those like fellow seniors out there who are really pushing back to just give it a try. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, you can waste some time, but
Yeah.
but
We all
yeah,
waste
yeah.
time.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, even like obviously from my perspective, being CEO of Frontend Masters, I do write a lot of code for our website. Depends on if our dev team is busy and we need to push out like a feature or something like that. Sometimes I'll throw in some extra wheels, and yeah, I definitely feel like it's been useful to at least kind of bang against the edges of like what AI is or isn't capable of at the moment. Because yeah, every 6 months it does seem
Change.
to change a bit, and I think that's valuable advice to just kind of like try it out, see what it's good or not good for. Because like you might think in a couple of weeks, like, oh, okay, yeah, I could use it for this. Like
Exactly.
this isn't something that's like mission critical.
Yep.
It's something that would really help me to just kind of automate.
Yeah, think of those things that take you 5 or 10 minutes every single day that you have to do and automate them. And now you don't have to do them anymore. Keep track of notes, do anything that you would have, built scripts for in the past and just let AI do it for you, right? Instead of spending an hour doing it, spend 5 minutes doing it. And you're still making your life easier and better. And now you're using these tools and seeing how good they are.
Cool. Well, with that, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been the coolest experience of my life. So, thank you.
Cheers.